into the cloud. Well, again, welcome everybody. My name is Scott Brown. I'm the District 11 Program Quality Director here in Indiana and Northern Kentucky. It is fantastic seeing everybody again tonight. How are you all doing out there? Everyone's having a good evening? Nice and warm, enjoying the Aurora Borealis that we can see probably from our own backyard because it is that cold outside. It is nice to see everybody inside tonight. We had a couple of folks last night that were banished to their porches. Their 3-season rooms became their Toastmasters room. So it's nice to see everybody inside and warm tonight. Tonight is President's Training. So hopefully all of you are either club presidents or aspiring to be club presidents. This is your opportunity to learn a little bit more about what it takes to be a club president, the club president roles. And I'm feeling there will just be some open discussion tonight to be able to share some best practices, some things that we have learned along the way for all of us who have been club presidents for a number of years, and to try to help your journey just a little bit easier as you move forward. Having said all of that, how many of you are brand new club presidents for this term? Okay, there's a couple, fantastic. So the reason why we are doing the office specific training this time is exactly just for all of you, because we know that at the turn of the year, especially in this year, we have had some folks that have had to leave Toastmasters for life reasons, and other individuals have taken over those roles. Normally, we have very few club president club officer turnover at the turn of the year. This year's been a little bit higher than what we have had in most years, though. So because of that turnover, we're doing the role-specific training. So a couple things. You probably weren't involved so much last term. Just want to help you understand a little bit how this whole thing works. So as we do all of this training, the reason why we are doing live sessions is because we need to have live sessions in order for it to count for Toastmasters International. Toastmasters back in March was still saying, no, we are sorry, we do not want anyone to be able to hold online meetings. And then everything started to shut down. And the more things shut down, the more Toastmasters finally caved on that and said, no, we think being online is probably a good idea. But we still wanted to have live trainings. Well, that lasted for about a day and a half. Then they realized, well, if we're going to do all our clubs online, we should do our trainings online too. But we want them to still have a live component. That's why we do this stuff live. If you have officers that can't make their scheduled night because, well, life happens, we don't expect any of you to put Toastmasters first in your life, but just to be part of your life. If you have anybody that couldn't make it, have them go to our YouTube channel accessible through the District 11 website. I believe that right now we have 65 videos that are up there right now. They are all of the trainings that we started back in March and forward. As long as a club officer watches a video that we've recorded and posted and then comes to a club officer table roundtable, yep, those roundtables that we have are the live component to give officers credit for watching the videos so that you can get credit towards your DCP points. So you can either come to one of these live events or you can watch a video and go to a roundtable. So does that make sense? Thumbs up if that makes sense to what you can do for your officers to get credit. Very good. All right, Sean, I didn't see any thumbs up. Are you good with that or no? Fantastic. I ask because on an average day, I get 30 to 35 emails asking that exact question. That's a lot of email. So I'm trying to get that out of the way first. Tonight, our training is going to be facilitated by the one and only Division F Director, my friend Rick Holtmeier. Rick is kind of like me in a lot of ways, that District 11 was not his first rodeo for Toastmasters. Rick has been a member of 2 other districts before life brought him to the state of Indiana, or to the state of Kentucky for Rick, I believe. So he has a little bit of a different perspective than what some of us have. Just like I've been in Florida clubs for many years, he was in clubs in, I believe, Minnesota, and I forget the other place. Was it Wisconsin, Rick?
New York.
New York, so sorry. So he brings a wealth of experience, and as a division director, he raised the bar for all division directors. This year, as an area director last year, he did the same thing, which is why he became a division director. We're looking forward to seeing what he does in the future. So put your hands together. Please help me welcome your facilitator for the night, Division F Director, DTM, Rick Holtmeier.
Thank you very much. As I look at the audience here, I see that there are many of you that were probably not born when I started Toastmasters. My first meeting was actually in New Jersey in 1988, April. What that means is I've been around a long time, but I keep trying to do it right. Sooner or later, I'll get it right. But it also means I've had a lot of experience in a lot of club positions. This is my fourth time as a division director. I've been an area director more than a dozen times. I've been every role in every club office at least 3 or 4 times over that time period. So I asked me the other day how many contests I have been involved in or had a role in, and numbers came out to over 100. That's a lot, but it counts up fast when you're going to perhaps a club contest and an area contest and a division contest and a district contest on 1 year. Today we're going to talk about the club president's role again, I'm saying my audio is breaking up. It's all I've got. So I can't help you anymore. But the reason that we're here is to make sure we understand what is expected of a club president. Before I walk into that, though, I'd like to get an idea a little more about all of you. Part of this will be interactive discussion, and it'll be very hard for me to call on people whose face I cannot see. So if you've opted out and are willing to take that penalty, that's fine. My question is, first of all, of those of you that said this is your first session, does that mean well, I'll ask the question differently. How many of you just became a president since the last training session that would have ended at the end of August? How many of you just became a president since August of last year? A couple of you. How many of you have seen this same presentation that looks like this? How many have seen this presentation before? Yes, God, yes, I imagine. Well, we're going to more or less follow the official slideshow, but one of the things I think this slideshow underestimates is the role of leadership in a president. A president can set the tone for the entire club. A couple of other division directors and I have taken a look at what clubs, even under COVID, are doing well and those that are not. And we found unequivocally the clubs that are doing very, very well have presidents and other officers that are leading those clubs, not sitting back and waiting for it to happen, but are leading those clubs to certain objectives. Therefore, in my opinion, the president of the club is the single most important person. That doesn't mean that the president can do everything alone or should do everything alone. As we talk some of these slides, I'd like to really have a little discussion about certain operational situations, certain knowledge points. For those of you that have never seen this slideshow before, there will be some of these things you can't really participate in easily, but you can still learn from the discussion that takes place. For those of you who have been presidents before or have participated in this show before, you may have some had answers, but there's always the answers that the slideshow gives, and then there's rich ranting that are sometimes a little different than are in the slideshows. So let me share my screen and let me start and go through the first few slides. If you're not here for president's training, you're in the wrong place. That's the first thing. And now, there we go. The slide is really divided into three parts. What the general role of the president is, And then closely look at role our responsibilities. And then there's a whole section on presidential resources where you can go look for things. Most important is that the slideshow and the associated manual for the slideshow are free, can be downloaded directly from the Toastmasters International site. Look for President Training. What we will do during the session is we're going to talk about, first of all, your role, how you fulfill those responsibilities, and I already mentioned resources. So let me ask you a few questions about your role first. How many of you could tell me your club mission? Why do we go to a club? Where does a club exist? Anybody? Put a hand up. Rodney.
Yes. You mean to give it to you?
Sure.
We provide a supportive and positive training experience in which members are empowered to develop communications and leadership skills, resulting in greater self-confidence and personal growth.
I can tell you must have memorized that, right?
I did. Scott
a few
made
years
me.
ago, really, a few years ago, there was another word in there you'll still find on the miscellaneous topics. It was the word mutually. It used to say mutually supportive. Mutually had dropped for some reason. I'm not exactly sure why. But let's talk about in general, to support that club mission. To support that club mission, that means that you have to find a way to make yourself instrumental in helping all of your club members achieve what they want to achieve. If you can simply do that, your club is going to meet almost every other objective. Now that means to me, the president has got to spend a lot of time talking to his club members. It was really easy when we all got together in a room, right? You saw people you wanted to talk to after the meeting, you circulated. As a matter of fact, many clubs spent more time talking after the meeting than they seemed to be talking during the meeting. But now, how do we do it now? It's very difficult. You have to make it, as a leader, you have to make it your responsibility to reach out and talk to club members through other means. And email doesn't necessarily cut it because it's too easy to ignore emails. The president's role, though, to get into the formal part of it, is really broken into three main places where the president works. The club meeting, then outside of the club meeting, and then the executive committee. Now let's start with the club meeting. Let me ask you this question. Anybody can respond that wishes to. At a normal club meeting, whether it's online or in any other place, how soon should the president get to the club meeting? Anybody? Carly, do you have an opinion?
I do. I try to get there when the sergeant at arms would arrive, maybe 15 minutes early, make sure the room was set up. Also to greet members as well as guests. So now I do the same thing on our Zoom or Microsoft Teams call. I'm on early, and as the members are arriving, I have a conversation with them.
And you see that Carly essentially presented the entire next slide. 4 club meetings. When you arrive during club meetings, well, I want to go one more than that. Why? Just to find out what's going on, really. If you haven't already arranged with the VPE, hey, there might be some special recognitions. I was once in a club, I got a DTM in that club, and the VPE and the president didn't even mention it. It never even got mentioned in the club meeting. If I had been around for a while, I might have been a little discouraged by that. Finding the business portion of the meeting is interesting because some clubs I know do not have business portions of the meeting. But what types of things do you think might be called upon that would have to be planned almost ad hoc. We wouldn't know in advance. Anybody have any ideas about that? Raise your hand. If you don't volunteer, I'll volunteer you. How about you, Terry? What can you tell us that might be something that should be planned right before the meeting that might have to come up in the business portion of the meeting? I can't hear you, Terry. You're on mute. I will unmute you. I still don't hear you, Carrie. Well, let's try somebody else then.
Rick, you might
Sorry,
need to
Terry.
repeat because you're breaking up really bad during that segment.
Yeah, it's really, I can't.
Every once in a while you just cut out, but you're back now, but you might have to repeat that question because I don't know if everybody heard it or not.
Oh, I've never had problems being heard before. So let me try it again. For what reason do you think that a club president would need to have a short-term plan for altering some portion of the business meeting? Go ahead, Terry.
Yeah, I can't. Can you hear?
All right, let me try some. Anybody else volunteer want to give it a shot, Kyle?
I'm not sure I would be the best member here to answer most of those questions, as I am fairly fresh to the presidential leadership position. But if I'm understanding your quick plan for the parliamentary procedure, or what was the last portion of that question once more?
What might you have to do to alter the business portion of the meeting and do that just before the meeting? That's a reason for getting there early.
Oh, in the event that there are small changes to any part of the plan for the next week or any portion of this, it's very useful to get there early to the meeting in order to meet with the officers if there is any kind of material needed or anything that needs to be distributed before the meeting starts, if I'm answering that correctly.
Well, there's no correct answer, but your answer is correct.
Hey,
The-
hey, Rick, this is Carrie.
Yep.
Pushed a button and now I can't see you, but I can see the PowerPoint and it's not jumping all over my screen. So you feel free to ask me a question if you can hear me.
Well, I can hear you just fine. So now,
Okay.
what could happen in the business portion of a meeting that you might not know of in advance of the meeting?
Well, oftentimes there would be people that, because especially in a corporate club, it can be any club really, where somebody is not able to be there that had a role assigned to them. So quite often there are changes that take place at the very beginning of the meeting or right before the meeting, where you have to alter the order or alter the role, or there's a lot of different things that can occur in any given meeting, actually.
Well, that's part of what I was trying to get at, but to me, there's something that's the most important thing, something you should cherish by having to have in a meeting, and that is the admission of a new member. Now, according to Toastmasters protocols, new members must be voted into membership of the club. And that you probably don't know about until you get there. Somebody tells you, you just had a member that joined. That also goes into the concept of what parliamentary procedure is, but that's a whole different subject, and a lot of clubs dispense with that and want to meet more informally. But in reality, I just walk through it. You have a new member come in. Before they can do anything as a member, you're supposed to vote them into the club. Somebody introduces the motion. The motion is seconded to accept them as a member, and a vote takes place. I noticed it said somebody introduces the motion. Just one thing I want you to learn from your president's role in parliamentary procedure: you are not allowed to introduce a motion. President is not doing that. They're a presiding officer. If you yourself have to introduce, or you need to introduce a motion, then you have to step down, put your VPE up on the lectern, and process from there. But that's a minor point. Let's go on to the next place here.
So Rick, why do we vote people into a club? Why is this so important?
Well, I hate to say this because I don't like the reason. First of all, I think, regardless of any other reason, a person feels honored when you vote them in. I felt honored when I was voted into my club in 1988. Hey, these people are willing to accept me. But there is a technical reason why also, because you cannot dismiss a member unless they've been voted in. So if you voted a member in, you may vote them out. I have never been involved in a situation where I've had to do that. I never want to be involved in a situation where I've had to do that. But I have heard of very rare situations in Toastmasters where a member needed to be dismissed for the health of the club and the organization. Let me move these pictures over out of my way and go back to here. Review the meeting agenda was already mentioned by several of you, and then also greet the guests and members. I'm telling you, I have done a lot of visits as a guest, even as an area director. And when somebody comes to me, I move into the room, I am the president, this is my name, introduce yourself. Just the feeling you get from the club is huge, especially if it's the president that's coming up and saying, hey, Rick, my name is Joe President. Have a chair right over here. Thank you for coming to visit us. In my opinion, when we're in person or whether we're online, that should be done by every single president with every single guest at the club. You have to get there early to be able to do that. Notice it says on this slide, greet guests and members. Usually if you can get to an online session 15 minutes or so early, you have a chance to do that. You might know some personal about somebody, and before the meeting, you can make a mention of it to congratulate the person, to welcome them back from something that was keeping them away for a while, maybe a long vacation, things like that. You just set the tone for the rest of the club. Let's talk a little bit about during the club meetings. Call the meeting to order. This is just standard stuff. Introduce guests. We've been through that before. Explain the meeting's events. This is really associated with guests for the most part. I have been to meetings, watching meetings take place that have a couple of guests, and for the most part, the guests aren't really introduced to what's going on. It's like an assumption. They know what an evaluation is. They know what a prepared speech is. They know what table topics are. They don't. And the richness you add to the meeting by connecting with those guests before the meeting starts causes a completely different experience for the guest. So those meeting events should be really introduced to the guest. And then if you have a business portion of your meeting during the meeting, which is uncommon with business, with corporate clubs, but it generally happens at some of the public meetings, then you have to address it. Now, I have found that a lot of people just are not comfortable with running a business meeting. And that's why a lot of clubs go and do it more informally. And that's just fine. But you should expect the higher you go and the higher level of meetings, when you get up to the district, everything is done by very careful parliamentary procedure at the district councils. And above, especially, if you've ever been to an international or go to an international, you'll see the same thing. There is this little Toastmasters sessions called Parliamentary Procedure in Action. Might try out one of those. I think that's a Success in Leadership program. And it's still there, regardless of whether it's in Pathways or not. I believe it's in Pathways as an elective. And then at the end of the meeting, there should be something done by the president, or maybe you've delegated to somebody else, should say, okay, where's the next meeting? When is the next meeting? And most importantly, who's the Toastmaster for the next meeting? That segues into the next couple of slides. Making announcements that you end up adjourning a meeting. Well, let's talk about outside of the club meeting. Attend and vote at council meetings. Who can tell me what a council meeting is? Somebody out there knows what a council meeting is? No one?
Hi, Rick. This is Candace.
Hi.
Hi. So it's my understanding that the council meeting is a meeting that happens every other month. It composes of the trio as well as all of the area directors and the division directors.
Well, that is the correct answer for a district council meeting. This is referring to something else. It's referring to an area council meeting in particular at this level. Who is on the area council in your club?
Oh, I apologize. That would be, it's my understanding, the president. And I believe it's the president.
The president is a primary member of the area council. The president and the EVP, and just recently added to that, relatively recently, is the VPM. So all three of those would be part of the area council. So when your area director tries to have an area council meeting, often in association with an area contest, something like that, those three officers are expected to try to go. And you as president lead that group. The attending and voting at annual business meetings. Again, who has votes at annual business meetings that are associated with your club? I'll give that to you. Those people that have votes at annual business meetings are the president and the VPE. Now that's important if you're going to, when it says annual business meetings, that means a district level meeting. And then another thing, appoint chair. Well, chair and audit committees, most of our clubs are informal. We don't have those in them, but appoint a nominating committee. The nominating committee, that means who is nominating your officers next year? Anyone want to tell me generally who the chair of the nominating committee is? Anybody want to give it a shot? Eric, how about you? Can you tell me?
Is it the outgoing president? This is Jyoti.
That's great. That's exactly correct. Well, when should the nominating committee start its job? Anybody want to try that? A general, go ahead. Who is going to?
It's Carrie. I would generally, and I don't know the official answer for that, but I would guess around March. I've been on the nominating committee a few times, and that seems to be when we started.
You as president do delegate that the leading of the nominating committee to the immediate past president. However, the president has the power to designate or to appoint anyone he or she wants to the nominating committee. Now, I get really disappointed when I go to clubs and I find out that the extent of their nominating committee is, hey, anyone who wants an office, give me an email or send an email. That doesn't do it. I have this attitude about appointments or say nominations that is perhaps different than others. I believe every single person in the club should be interviewed by the nominating committee, first of all, to find out what they want to do. And then once the nominating committee has a chance to look at the opportunities, they go out to the club member and they say, I think you ought to consider being our VPE next year because you're good at this, you're good at that, and you seem to have this set of skills, and here's where your opportunity comes. That process starts in end of April, beginning of end of March, beginning of April. The idea being so that during the month of April, the nominating committee does its work, as I just described. Then during the month of May, at the May meeting, the potential officers are nominated. We have elections. And that leaves the entire month of June for the new officers to pair up with existing officers and have job turnover. You, as president, have to appoint that nominating committee. Put that on your calendar for April, beginning of the end of March. You also instruct the nominating committee how to go about it. It is not just telling them to ask anyone if they want to do something. Any questions about officer nominations?
Rick, there's usually one officer that isn't allowed to run for a second term repeatedly, where others can. Do you know, can you talk a little about why that is and who that is?
The president is not allowed to succeed themselves. Now, if you do, there's no penalty. It's not like international come over and police what's going on in your club. But the problem is, and I've seen clubs where the same person has been president for 4 or 5 years in a row, and what happens is that person almost becomes a cult leader, it seems. And certainly, diversity of opinion, diversity of style is not really allowed to flourish. That's what we're all about. We need to have diversity of opinions. We need to have a diversity of people. We need to be able to train other people to perform different roles. Don't let yourself get into taking the president's role more than 1 year in a row. Find somebody who can stretch and do it. As a matter of fact, when you're president, I always recommend you finding someone who might be your assistant during the year, that maybe doesn't have an officer role during the next year, that might be the person you would have the nominating committee look at when it goes into your next year. I actually urge all officers to have an assistant to allow for that type of turnover at the end of the year. Other questions on nominating? I have another question for all of you. So you can show by raising your hands or whatever symbols you have. How many of you in your club have executive committee meetings? One. You never have an executive committee meeting? Raise hand there. A few. Again, this is Rick's rule. When I'm president, I will have an executive committee meeting every quarter, whether we need it or not. The reason is, first of all, make sure your entire officer crew is in lockstep. And when the issue is raised, they can be raised perhaps more often. Maybe someone is not having a successful plan. The group of you get together, help with a plan is great. It also helps with acceptance of certain changes. So for example, when we decided to go live with Zoom rather than stay or not meet, the executive committee got together, discussed the plan, figured out how to implement it, and then went on and presented it to the club. So all the groundwork was done by the executive committee meeting, and that was accepted by the rest very easily. That executive committee meeting, in some cases, takes place informally. You know, a lot of corporate clubs have a few people that are there, but if it does take place formally, or if you decide to do it, who should be on that executive committee? I'll give you part of it. I've already done it. The 7 officers. Who else?
The past president.
The immediate past president as well. That's your executive committee. Most things that are voted on by the executive committee have to go for the membership anyway. But all the planning and a lot of debating can already take place in the executive committee meeting. Now, I want to say one other thing about outside of the club meeting. Let us say that you're the president now, you're responsible for making everything work. You have a non-performing officer. You have a non-performing officer. What steps might you take? Somebody volunteer. Tell me, what would you take? What steps would you take if you had a non-performing officer? Carla, go ahead.
Well, the first thing I would do is meet with them and find out if they understand their responsibilities and what their role is. I would also find out if they had any barriers or reasons why they were unable to fulfill that and try to work through those with them.
Carla says something that I just love. She used more words, but the answer is you need to listen to that person. You need to listen to that person. And I'll give you a good example of why. We had a non-performing treasurer, which is really bad because it gets your club in a lot of trouble. I went to that treasurer and spoke with her, just like Carla recommends. Treasurer, are you familiar with your responsibilities? You know when you have to collect dues, those kinds of things. And the first thing she said to me was, well, you know, I'm really having trouble at work. I just can't get the time. And so what I did, I decided to spend some of my own time there and listen some more. That wasn't really the problem. When I listened some more, we found out that she had some health problems that were very, very serious. And at that stage, I had to decide, what do I do? Do I take an unhealthy Toastmaster and work with her, maybe give some of my time, or do I do what the club best practices say to do? They say when you have a non-performing member, you try to do like Carla suggests, try to get them into conformance, but then you replace them. You hold a special election to replace them. I decided just to help her out. And the problem was that Toastmaster's health problems were so serious that she died. And it would have been the worst thing. I would never have forgiven myself if I hadn't taken the time to listen to her and understand and work with her, even to do some of her jobs at that time, to replace somebody because they've, like in a situation like that, would have been perhaps right according to the book. But I urge you to use your own judgment and really listen, as Carla suggests, to what is behind that non-performing officer. And that's what's meant on this slide by overseeing club administration.
Rick, can I throw something in here real quick?
Yep.
There's probably something that's happening in your clubs conversation-wise now that really takes the whole committee process to a necessity. How many of you have plans for what you're going to do once the world opens back up and we can start to meet again? How many of you have a definite plan for if you're going to be hybrid, if you're going to be just in person, where you're going to meet, if you're not a corporate club, how it's going to look, all those sorts of things? If you don't have a plan for that right now, really consider starting to pulling together your executive committee and discussing that, because you're not just going to need a where, you're going to need a how. If you're going to go hybrid, there's some stuff that y'all got to get. You're going to have to get camera. You're going to have to get mics. There's some things you're going to need to be able to pull off hybrid meetings. So if you haven't started thinking about that yet, start to have those conversations now. If you have already had those conversations, kudos to you. That is fantastic. But if you haven't, really consider that now. Sorry, Rick, thanks.
No, that's fine. I also want you to consider that I just know Area 61, approximately half of the clubs in Area 61 will probably not have their meeting facilities available. Half of the public clubs, that is, will not have their meeting facilities available even once we're off COVID. Think about that. So if you don't have a plan, if you're not talking with the people that used to provide you a space, you're going to have some trouble. Did you have something to comment, Rodney?
Yeah, two comments I'd like to make. One, I'll go back to the executive committee. We had a change in treasurer, and to go to the bank and fill out the forms for signature, we had to produce minutes from the executive committee. So it's important that you do have the executive committee and you have the secretary take the minutes and have a record of those so that you can use them for those type of purposes. The question about the hybrid meetings, we actually have a couple members that live in Japan. So we're going to have to go to the hybrid meetings. We've already talked about how to do that. Our biggest concern is the signal that we have available in the basement of a church. So we got to figure out how to work through that. And we're in the process of doing that right now. But if you have members who are outside of the locale, then you might want to think about deeply how you're going to do the future.
And that's also an example of clubs that leveraged the online meetings to be able to expand their membership. Our club has people from the Bronx, Pennsylvania, and we meet in beautiful downtown Louisville. So we'll have to go in hybrid. We'll have to go hybrid. And there is an investment involved in going hybrid. You have to be able to have your sergeant at arms prepared for it. You have to have the infrastructure for it, because the image seen on the screen is not necessarily the same image that you're going to be seeing when you're remote, right? And remote and local, there's something different. So plan for that. That's a good point, Scott. I want to say a couple things about outside the club meeting. Go back to the slide here. Advanced club and member achievement. When I go into a club as a visitor for an area visit, I ask of two questions right at the beginning to try to get an idea of where that club is at. The first thing I ask is, okay, show me the educational plan for each of your members. And in the clubs that really have it together, they'll hand it to me in paper because they know I'm coming for a visit. I need to know that information. They already have it prepared. Unfortunately, too many clubs don't have that answer. They don't know. Now, maybe the VPE knows it, but it hasn't been communicated to the president. And as president, I would insist on getting that information so I know who I can help give them that little extra oomph to get over or to get through a particular goal. The second question is a lot like the first, but it also fits in the responsibility of the president. I look at the VPPR and say, tell me your public relations plan. Too often the answer is something like word of mouth. And almost always when I see an answer like that, I look at the club membership and it's a low membership club. Now you as president have to really direct those two segments, because the VPE has got to be able to advance the club and member achievement to retain membership. And it has also got to be able to help direct the public relations to get guests in so we can get more members. Don't be shy by thinking, you're a president, I'm the VPE, just stay out of my business, right? It's the other way around. You need to help the VPE, the VPPR, as well as all of the other offices. I just happen to, in my own style, look at those two first. And the other part fits into the same here. This interact effectively with other organization levels. You know, if you ever want to advance to a district office, the first thing that the nominating committee is going to ask you is something like this. Can you name the top 3 people in the district and their roles? We've got one right here with us, Scott Brown. He's number 2, which makes him Club Growth Director. Did I get that right? Program Quality Director. You know, in the olden days, there were different names for all 3 of those roles. And even then, we called them number 1, number 2, and number 3. you should be able to be comfortable knowing who your area director is and going to your area director for help when you can or need to, and then through your district division director, and then through the right places in the district. So that's what that means, interact effectively. And interact effectively in this district, the primary way is email, at least from what I've seen, primary with email. And I seem to be getting great response from all the district officers when I put in emails. I do my best to get great responses when people ask me questions or need help, but I don't get what, 40 emails a day asking about anything. So we mentioned the executive committee. I'll just walk through these pieces. President oversees the executive committee, ensures that the committee does its work, meets, in my opinion, at least once a quarter. I won't go through all these. These are really mechanics. It really happens at the beginning of the year. If you have a budget, you do it at the beginning of the year. The club success plan is partially at least associated with the member advancement. But I'll tell you, 2 years ago, when this first request came up, basically it says, hey, listen, we're getting rid of pathways. Not getting rid of pathways, we're getting rid of the legacy program, and we are going to pathways. We had to decide where to spend our energy. And in the particular club, we had to spend our energy in membership because we knew there were a large percentage of our club that was an old legacy group that was unwilling to accept pathways. Because the officers all concentrated on that plan, we had 12 new members in 1 year. 12 new members. We didn't make our DCP. We were not a distinguished club, but we had to do that in order to survive, because the remaining members from a 20-member club, if we didn't have that 12 in, would have been 4. So you have to choose where you spend your time. That's part of leadership. And it doesn't necessarily strategize for success in distinguished club program, because sometimes your plan has to be related to survival. I've gone as far as I'm going to go with the slideshow. And I'd like to now open it up for discussion of some things. If we were following the script exactly that Toastmasters International puts out, you're supposed to be broken into groups of 4 and go off into discussion in meeting rooms. The reason I don't like to do that is because I think that the meat of a lot of things takes place within the discussion that the other groups don't get to see. They tell me as a facilitator, I should walk around the groups and listen to discussions, but that doesn't bring it out into the open with this group. So what I would request you to do now, any question, any topic, any anecdotes, fun, not fun, that you'd like to speak about, raise your hand and we'll unmute you. Yes, Eric.
Thanks, Rick. Can you go over the specifics of potentially removing an officer? We've lost officers a couple of times because they've elected to retire from the company or the club, leave the company, meaning they had to leave the club, or, vice versa. They just left the club because they were done with Toastmasters. And we've never had a situation where someone was so underperforming that we potentially had to replace them. Can you go into a little more detail about that? Not that I expect it's happening. I know my other officers are in this meeting, so I'm not trying to replace anyone.
I had to do this in the past as president, but when I suggested the person, after talking to them, when I suggested that person that they may want to step aside, they were relieved. They were relieved. And sometimes there's an intermediate position you can take. For example, if I've had an example where a VPE just couldn't do it, but really didn't want to leave the position. I found someone to work with her, to be their assistant. And that makes a lot of difference too. But you really have to make sure you do it in a nurturing way. There's what you do is you talk to the person, say something like, well, you know, supposing we got someone else to do it for the rest of the year, how would you feel about that? And those two conditions of which I did, it was really, whew. Okay, so then what do? Reconvene the nominating committee, find a good person to put in that role, vote on it, just like at any other time.
Rick, oftentimes when when an officer is replaced, you know, they've come to the president or come to the officer group and asked to be removed from that position because they're struggling. And part of it is to know and to speak with them and to know if they really want out of that position or if they just really need some help. And, you know, they throw their hands up. So the first thing you do is try to encourage them, try to give them help, try to give them mentoring, you know, because some positions, officer positions, are harder than others. You know, for me, I've been in Toastmasters for 15 years and I've been president multiple times over that period of time. And the slate of officers makes the president's position either easy or extremely difficult. And I've always been pretty lucky, but I have had over the course of those years had officers come to me, and before you've asked someone or thought you should replace someone, usually they come forward first. Then you have to decide if, you know, if it can be saved or not, honestly. And they usually make that decision.
I would say you've been pretty lucky because a lot of times people that are drowning in their position don't want to call for help. It's like a loss. I don't know why that is. And that's why you as president have to reach out to them. You can't wait for them to come. But like I say, you've been lucky. I wish I had been that lucky.
I've been very lucky, I must say. And, you know, Eric, who's on this call as well, he makes my life so easy currently. But over the years, there have been officers that just weren't able or weren't willing to do the responsibilities of their position, whatever that position might be. It could be one that's pretty laborious, like takes a lot of work, like VP. It could be something as simple as this, you know, the treasurer, secretary. Could be something down, you know, what we consider the easier officer positions in our club because it's a corporate club. So treasurer has, you know, few duties, honestly. But sometimes they accept responsibility, but they don't accept the responsibility, right? And then sometimes they just get buried. They allow themselves to get buried. So you really have to figure out if it's something that you can help or maybe something that you can't help.
And it's very hard for some people to shout for help. Scott, how are we doing on time?
You have about 3 minutes left.
Well, I might give you 3 minutes early because I just want to say this. A president has to be a leader. That means you have to be actively involved in the welfare of your other officers and the welfare and the achievements of the rest of your club. You also represent your club outside of your club at the area, district, division. You also have to lead there and make sure that those other levels of organization are working for your club also. Once you do that, you're really fulfilling your duties. You always have to keep in mind your success comes from the success of the other people in your club. Keep that in mind and then do what is necessary to make it happen. That's all I have for you tonight. Scott?
Let's give it up for Rick Holt, for Division F Director Rick Holtmeier. Thank you so very much. That was absolutely fantastic. So before we go, I want to end on something that Rick started with tonight that I think, I've been a president, I think 9 times now in 8 years of 7 different clubs. The one thing that I would say is probably the underlying success for any club is the culture. Knowing why you exist as a club. What is it that makes you different from other clubs? Why do your members choose you as a club? And doing everything you can to ensure that that culture engages your members, energizes your members, draws out the best of what your members have, and gives them a reason to continue to come back. Culture always, always creates a reason for connection. Can also create a reason to not connect if you do it wrong. But focus on your culture. When you get your culture right, everything else tends to fall in place. And you don't have to worry about getting booted because Eric doesn't like you in your role as a club officer. And he wants to figure out how to get rid of you. That's not it at all. But culture matters. Culture just absolutely matters. Fantastic. Rick, thank you so, so very much. Before we go, tell me about 3 minutes left. Before we end the chat tonight, remember to put in your name, your club name, and the role that you hold, so we can make sure that you get credit for this, because this is very important to make sure you get credit for this. Does anybody have any other questions that you want to ask in the last couple of minutes before we get off the call? Is there anything sitting out there that you just really have been dying to understand? District-wise, president-wise, Toastmasters-wise?
Hey, Scott, it's Candace again.
Hiya.
I had a question as it relates to the nominating committee. So if I understand correctly, the president will spearhead in connecting with the past president and at that point try to determine who would be on that nominating committee?
The immediate past president is really the one that drives the nominating committee process. As long as your immediate past president is still involved in your club, and we know that at times that life takes people away from Toastmasters. That's how Rick and I both ended up in Indiana, because life brought us from where we were in other clubs to here. Life does happen. And if your past president is still involved, utilize them to ensure that they can create a nominated committee and that they're tied into that as well. Carrie Schaff, I need to know what club you're in also. You just put in your name and your role.
I know, and I just.
Okay, thank you. So does that help, Candace?
Yes, Scott, it does.
Cool.
So I'll just make sure that the past president knows about it. And we've talked about it before. I just was trying to make sure I wasn't supposed to spearhead that nominating committee.
No, your IPP is the one that really does that.
Okay.
So be down with your IPP. Carla.
And if your immediate past president is not involved, then what's the course of action?
The one before that can always do it as well.
And if you don't have that
One
available,
before that. None of them are a part of they left the organization, the one before that.
Do you have anybody that's not serving that's not serving as an officer right now that's been around for a while?
We have lots of members. They're all brand new. The majority of the officers are charter members, but we can take this offline and I can reach out.
It happens in a lot of places, especially during COVID. We lost a lot of members. We lost a lot of clubs. If you don't have those folks there, then as an executive committee, y'all can do it yourselves too. You can reach out and talk to other members. It's not so formal like the district that there's specific things that you have to do. There are no Toastmasters police showing up your house.
Okay.
If that happens, call the real police, because that's creepy and weird.
You
do the right thing. Yeah, do the right thing for your club. That's the most important part.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful.
Sure. Well, friends, it is 8 o'clock. I'm going to hit stop record. If you've already put your information into chat, y'all are free to go enjoy the rest of your evening.